So I want to begin by pointing out the fact that it's been 15 and a half years since the 21st century ended, the American century. And it was a century in which our nation overcame depression, led the world against evil multiple times, and recorded some of the greatest advancements in human history. Airplanes in the sky, boot prints on the moon, the world's knowledge first brought online. And all of this was possible because we built what no civilization had ever built before: a vibrant, stable, broad, and accessible middle class through which our people drove the affairs of the world. So my parents were two immigrants from Cuba with little formal education. They reached the middle class in that century. They did so through humble jobs. First, as an assembly plant for lawn chairs, and then my mother went to work as a cashier, a maid, and finally a stock clerk at Kmart. My father was primarily a bartender for hotel banquets. They never got rich, but my parents achieved the American dream because through these modest jobs, they reached financial security, they raised a family in a safe neighborhood, they provided for our needs, and they left their children with lives even better than their own. More people achieved this American dream in America in the 20th century than at any other time and in any other place in human history. But today, many jobs like the ones my parents held no longer provide a viable path to the middle class. Their jobs, assembling lawn chairs, or even the cashier job my mother held, have likely been replaced by machines. Other similar positions have been outsourced or have paid the same wage for a decade or more. Most of those impacted lack the qualifications to move into a better paying position, and the higher education they need is too expensive and requires too much time away from work and family. The result is that the path to the middle class is narrower today than it has been for generations, and the American dream so many achieved in the last century is now in peril. This hardship, it is not the result of a cyclical economic downturn that will naturally correct itself. It is born of a fundamental transformation to the very nature of our economy, the disruptions of which have been prolonged and compounded by the failure of our leaders, our policies, and our institutions to transform accordingly. There are two primary forces behind this transformation. The first is radical technological progress, including the development of the internet, information technologies, wireless and mobile capabilities, robotics, and more. And the second has risen partly from the first, and that is globalization. From where you sit, you can sell a product to someone on the other side of the world almost as easily as to the person on your left or your right. This has pulled us into competition with dozens of other nations for business, jobs, talent, and innovation. Over the last 2 decades, not a single industry has been untouched by these forces, and the disruptions have triggered a cascade of anxiety. Fewer Americans believe in the viability of the American dream today than during the worst of the financial crisis in 2009. Many pundits and media outlets stoke those fears, painting a dreary picture of the future in which automation and outsourcing continue to shatter the American workforce. But history is not silent on this subject. It's just the future is swayed by the actions we take, not by the predictions we make. Generations of Americans before us faced equally disruptive periods of transformation. For example, in the Industrial Revolution, machines suddenly automated tasks people had built their lives around for centuries. Like today, the beginning was rough. Jobs were lost, wages were static, and new wealth was concentrated at the top. Doubts and fears about the future were widespread. But then something changed. When our children learn about the Industrial Revolution today, they learn that it was a period of progress. Yes, jobs were lost, but even more were gained. And the middle class expanded, thrived, and laid the cornerstone of the American century. So how did that generation overcome the challenges? It wasn't through resistance, pushing back against new technologies or trying to resurrect old jobs. It was through adaptation, business integrating new technologies, workers learning new skills, and leaders leading in a new direction. Today's technological revolution carries extraordinary opportunities, even more, I believe, than the Industrial Revolution ever did. but we have not yet seized these opportunities, nor is it guaranteed that we will. Whether we do or do not will depend on the actions we take, the leaders we choose, and the reforms we adopt. For the first 15 and a half years of this century, for the first 15 and a half years of this century, Washington has looked to the past. Our economy has changed, but our economic policies have not. And we have learned painfully that the old ways no longer work. Washington cannot pretend that the world is the same as it was in the 1980s. It cannot raise taxes like it did in the 90s. And it cannot grow government like it did in the 2000s. The race for the future will never be won by going backward. It will never be won by hopping on Hillary Clinton's time machine to yesterday. She seems to believe, as many do, that pumping more of today's money into yesterday's programs will bring prosperity tomorrow. It will not. Nor will thinking small. Hiking the minimum wage by a few dollars will not save the American dream, but it will accelerate automation and outsourcing. Increasing taxes and regulations will not promote fairness or opportunity or help balance our budget, but it will snuff out innovation and crush small business. We need in this country a new president for a new age, with original ideas to unlock the two great doors to the future, the doors of innovation and the door of education. Only through an innovative economy can we translate new technologies into new middle-class jobs. And only through a revolutionized higher education system can we equip all of our people to fill these new and better-paying jobs. Prosperity in our time is likely if we act to embrace the future. We have opportunities that have never existed before and a chance to seize them that will never exist again. I come before you today to discuss my ideas, to spur American innovation onward, to ensure that the rise of the machines will not be the fall of the worker, and to create a new American century, propelled by a revitalized American dream and captured by a vibrant middle class.